All right, welcome everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you so much for being here. Uh, I always like playing this song, especially when I was a teacher for a couple of years, and a lot of students don't know the song. But when I would play it, it would definitely help us have a better day at school. So when I need a good day, this is my go-to. But yeah, again, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you all. I'm showing up on a Friday before the long weekend. I know it's really sunny where I'm at right now, and I'm excited to get outside. So I'm grateful for y'all taking some time out of your day to be here. So yeah, my name is Nicholas Jansen. I use he, his, him pronouns. I am the Rural Clean Energy Organizer for Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities. And I am very excited to be here today to be talking about kind of a niche topic, but one that can have really big impacts for all of us here in Northern Michigan. So um, just so you know, this is being recorded. We will send out the recording afterwards. Um, but yeah, I just want to kick off with sharing a little bit about why I'm here with Groundwork. You may have heard or not, but I did just join in February, so relatively new to the organization. I moved from downstate around Rives Junction, Michigan, outside of Jackson. That's where I grew up, but I was really excited to move up here with my fiance and dog to join Groundwork because really I say I was born and raised in Ryan Junction, Michigan, but I grew up in Michigan. I love traveling in the state. I love all that it has to offer. And I truly believe that as Michiganders, we all have a responsibility to protect the valuable resources we have, such as our water, such as our soil, and our communities. And so when I think about building resilient communities with groundwork, a huge part of that is having resilient energy grids. We're seeing more increased storms because of the climate crisis. And because of that, our electrical grids are becoming more and more vulnerable. We've seen downstate, especially with consumers and DTE, the past few years, they have been having more power outages for longer because they have not been able to adapt to some of these larger storms. And we are positioned uniquely here in Northern Michigan, though, with cooperatives to really be more nimble to adapt to what's come and really benefit all of our communities. And so we're going to be talking about what that looks like here today. So on the next slide is just our little overview of what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be doing a brief history, like a 101 of cooperatives, what they are, why they came to be, and where they're at here in Michigan and around the country. We'll dive more into the cooperatives that we do have here in Michigan. And then because we're new at this, we're only engaging a few cooperatives as groundwork this year. So we'll be talking about those. And then really, yeah, talk about the unique structure, about how they're governed, and because of that, where we can go. And then the second half of the call, which I'm really excited for and plan to spend the bulk of this, we have three great panelists. We have Courtney from Cherryland Electric to talk about the great work that Cherryland is pioneering and leading the state and the country on. We have Christian from Harvest Solar, who will talk about yeah, just the solar installer side and how he's seen that impact local communities. And then we have Joel from Reset, this national group that just helps rural electric co-ops all around the country adapt more clean and local energy, and it'll highlight some successes of other cooperatives across the country, so we know we're not alone. But yeah, so let's just get to it then. What are co-ops? Why are they here, and where are they? On the next slide, you'll see. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped the point. I do like interacting with folks, so I would love if you could drop in the chat. I want to see your name, if you wish to share your pronouns, where you're calling in from, and then especially because this will be helpful for our panelists as well. Do you have any questions you hope to learn today or anything you're wondering about? So I would just love to see your name, pronouns, where you're calling in from, and then if you do have any questions you really hope to have answered today, that can help us focus some content if need be. I want to sit here until I get at least one person to introduce themselves. This is a trick I did when teaching all the time. Just wait. I'll just say I'm from Elk Rapids right now, north of Traverse City, and I'm just excited to learn about, yeah, some of the things our panelists are going to talk about where we can go. Okay, well, let's just move on. As people are introducing themselves, so glad to have John here, Lauren here, Nicole, all you folks. Thank you for sharing this information. I appreciate that. Hey, Mark. Great. So yeah, on the next slide then, we're just going to kick off as people continue to introduce themselves. Thank you for doing that. I'm so glad you're all here. So what are rural electric cooperatives? Well, they're electric utility cooperatives, which distributes electricity and sometimes gas and like fiber optic cables for internet, while being owned by its membership. That's different than for-profit utilities such as DTE and consumers, which are there to make profit for their investors. And whereas here with cooperatives, any profits go back to the utility itself or to the members in terms of rate breaks or just better services. And why were they created? Well, in the 1930s, as the entire country was being electrified, it didn't make sense for the for-profit utilities to build a lot more lines for a lot fewer people in rural areas. So the Rural Electrification Administration was created and really helped to serve these rural communities. And today now we have over 42 million people around the country that are members, and our cooperatives cover a landmass greater than half the country. And we'll see a little video in just a second highlighting some of that. Actually, I think we might need to switch the sound. Yeah, actually, I don't think we can hear the video. Might need to switch the sharing real quick. See, this is the downside to having music playing. Sometimes we mess up our sound when we get to the actual presentation. So we're going to restart this real quick. I think, Ashley, you might need to stop sharing your screen and then reshare it.
Model.
Do you have audio now?
Back in the 30s.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I think you just be unmuted for this part.
Model really came about back in the 30s and 40s.
Here on the farm, where it's needed most, electricity is hard to get. Power companies want a profit. They get it in the city where people are scrunched up together, but the farms are left in the dark.
After the Great Depression, there was a big push, and electricity was one of those prongs that government helped extend co-ops to us.
And so all of the members would get together and build their own cooperative utility to supply electricity to their homes.
The REA was set up in 1935 to help farmers to get the power and light at the price they can afford.
The other model for utilities is the investor-owned utility. Their responsibility is to return profit for their shareholders.
But in a cooperative, there are no private investors, no profit making. You get power at cost. You and your neighbors will own your own electric system.
We are specifically not in business to make a profit. And in fact, if we make a profit, we either put it back into the company or we pay it back to the members.
In 1935, REA is born. 90% of all American farms without light or power. 1936, 26 REA systems, 7,500 farm families get light.
Cooperatives serve 42 million people.
Half the landmass of the United States.
It's the best model, really. I mean, the cooperative model is the best model because it is owned by its membership.
And they're a great place for grassroots democracy to be able to develop what looks best for our communities as far as our future power supply.
Great, thanks for that. And thanks for bearing with us with the audio. Glad we got it to work. So yeah, that would just recapping a couple of things. But as you saw, rural electric cooperatives were really created to help our rural communities and our farmers get the resources they need to feed the country, stuff like that. So where are our co-ops? As you heard, over 42 million people are a member of co-ops in the country. Over half our landmass are composed of cooperatives, which makes sense as they're in the more rural areas. And was one thing that I really like to see is that over $1 billion just in 2021 was returned to their members because these aren't for-profit companies, they're for their members. And then one thing I'm going to be highlighting and talking about a difference of is the difference of distribution cooperatives and generation and transmission cooperatives. You see, there are a whole lot more distribution cooperatives than generation and transmission cooperatives. And we'll talk about why on the next slide. So it's important to distinguish between the two because they perform two different functions. So the bigger ones, the main ones are called the GNTs or the generation and transmission cooperatives. These are the cooperatives that provide wholesale power to the distribution cooperatives through their own generation or by purchasing power. So GNTs, they have the power plants, they have the solar fields, the wind farms, and then they help distribute that and transport it to the distributive cooperatives. And what those do, the distribution cooperatives, they are really the foundation of the cooperative network. We're going to hear from Courtney from Cherryland Electric, which is a distribution cooperative, and they are really the direct point of contact for the members, member owners in the delivery of electricity and other services. And so when we talk about what we can and cannot do with these cooperatives, distribution cooperatives, they aren't the ones that typically build the power plants. They don't build the solar fields. They don't build the gas plants. That's what the GNT does. So when we talk about who can do what, that's one thing we're going to be distinguishing. So on this next slide, you'll see the rural electric cooperatives in Michigan. We have 10 all throughout the state. And there's this other one, Spartan Renewable Energy. That's not quite a cooperative, but it serves a lot of cooperatives. And there's 3 that we're really looking at. There's 2. You'll see there's a star next to it, Trainland Electric up in the pinky for Leelanau. There's 3, Great Lakes Energy, which is like west of the tip of the mitt, but then also goes down on the west side of the state there. And then number 7 in the top right of the lower peninsula, Presque Isle Electric and Gas. Those are some of the main ones we're working with here in groundwork. And one thing to notice, those are all distribution cooperatives. Number 9, Wolverine Power, that is the GNT for the lower peninsula, the generation and transmission cooperative. So when we talk about where all this power is coming from, it is coming from Wolverine Power. They supply the rest of the cooperatives. And one last thing to note on this slide, these maps are just kind of vague, as you can tell. And when they overlap cities, lots of times, though, those cities have a separate municipal utility company. For example, with Cherryland Electric, it shows that it's covering Traverse City, but Traverse City has their own utility company. And so a lot of these are outside of those city centers. I would love to see, though, are any of you here part of a cooperative? And if you are, can you please drop it in the chat? I just want to see, yeah, are people here from cooperatives? Or do you know if you're a cooperative? Or is this something you need to find out today? I know up here in Elk Rapids, outside of the city, Great Lakes Energy is my the provider. I've met a lot of folks and farmers in the area that have Great Lakes Energy. Okay, well, while you're thinking about that, we're gonna dive. Oh, we do have Valerie. Nice to see you. Trainland Electric, she loves it. Yeah, Trainland's pretty good. Cool. Well, keep on dropping those in there if you are a part of a cooperative. But we're gonna go to the next slide. And this is showing where our power is actually coming from. So again, Wolverine Power, they are our GNT, our generation and transmission cooperative. So they produce a lot of the power. They also buy some of the power. So at the top there, you see partially owned coal plants. Wolverine purchases some of the power from these coal plants in Ohio and also from a Campbell 3 generating facility, which you can see on the west side of the state there. Wolverine Power has 3 energy projects in the works. Down in Southwest Michigan is Gemstone Solar. Down also in Southwest Michigan, they are restarting the Palisades nuclear plant. It's going to be the first ever nuclear plant in the country to be restarted. And then they also have a big solar array they're investing in Northern Michigan and Gaylord. And then after that, we have all of their existing plants. They're all over the state, concentrations in like southwest and like middle of the upper part of the mitt. And just one thing I just want you all to notice here is there aren't many cooperatives for the size, I mean, not many power plants for the size of the area that these cooperatives serve. And so when we talk about where cooperatives need to go, especially in relation to community resiliency, we know that smaller, more localized grids not only benefit the economy, but providing local jobs, but they are more resilient grids. You don't have just one power plant that's susceptible to going down or transmission lines that can break over tens, if not hundreds of miles. They're much smaller to where they can be more easily manageable, fixed if they go offline, and serve power in the communities that they're from. But not just where our power is coming from as of now with these cooperatives. So on this next slide, you'll see the cooperatives that we are engaging. So again, the G&T of our area is Wolverine Power. They serve about 280,000 homes in 40 counties. And you'll see the energy mix there. As it sits now, so this is without any of those new projects, they get about 40% of the energy from nuclear, 20% from renewables, 20% from coal, and a little bit of gas, hydro, and oil. And so those numbers will change as these new projects come online. And then because Wolverine supplies the power to the other cooperatives and the ones we're engaging, Land Electric, Great Lakes Energy, and Presque Isle Electric and Gas, their makeups are going to be very similar as well. Yeah, about 40% nuclear for all of them, 20% renewables. And one thing to note here is Great Lakes Energy is actually the largest out of the distribution cooperatives. They have 128,000 members in 26 counties, while Land Electric and Presque Isle are both in the 30,000 range. And just one thing to note, as an organization, we are supporting some other rural electric cooperatives ad hoc. Just as we start talking to people and getting connected with other members and people around the state, we want to support this work wherever it is. And so we're just engaging with some folks up in Cloverland in the Eastern UP to talk about what this can look like up there. And what's interesting is that these cooperatives, they are democratically controlled by a board of directors. So conversely to how electrical power flows from Wolverine to the distribution co-ops, the power or the board members kind of flow separately here. So Land Electric, Great Lakes Energy, and Presque Isle Electric and Gas, they have board of director elections every year. Land has 7 members on the board, and Great Lakes Energy and Presque Isle Electric and Gas each have 9 members on the board. So this year, 2 are up for election for Land, and 3 are up for each Great Lakes Energy and Presque Isle Electric and Gas. And so what happens is when, every year as a member, you can nominate yourself or someone else that's a member of these cooperatives, get enough petitions to get on the ballot. And then throughout the ballot time, any member of that cooperative can vote for that candidate. And that's how they are elected. So it's voted on upon the members. However, then Wolverine Power is the G&T. Members that have the power don't vote directly on the Wolverine board. The board of Wolverine Power is composed of 2 people each from the lower cooperative. So Land sends 2 people to Wolverine board. Great Lakes Energy, 2 people to Wolverine's board. And Presque Isle sends 2 people to Wolverine's board. Wolverine Power has about 7 distribution cooperatives underneath it. So that means they have a 14-member board. There's one thing to note, though. There's only 5 of those that are true cooperatives. Wolverine Power also supplies and gets power from Spartan Renewable Energy, which is an alternative electric supplier, and then Wolverine Power Marketing Corps. They're not co-ops, but they still have members that are on the board of directors. And I see your question, Sherry. Thank you for asking. What do I mean by supporting and engaging the co-ops? That's a great question. We're going to answer that more towards the end, but just really quick, that can look like anything from just like showing up to board meetings and engaging with the boards. It could be calling and writing letters to a board. It could be running for office if you're interested, or board of directors, I should say, or like supporting a candidate that you like. But this is all to say, there are lots of different ways that you can interact with these boards and with these cooperatives. And a lot of these people, they're all good people. They all care about their communities. They all want reliable, affordable electricity for their communities. And so it's not an adversarial thing. It's just all working together, providing information and creating more engagement so we can all be a part of the conversation for where these cooperatives need to go. So on the next slide, Is just a little visual representation of who currently are on these board of directors. So you'll see with Cherryland Electric, these are all the current people on their board. With Terry Lautner and Gabe Schneider, they're both up for re-election this year. The nomination process for Cherryland's candidates this year is already passed, and I believe they're both running unopposed, so they're going to stay there. But within Cherryland Electric, we have Melinda Lautner and Tom Van Pelt on Wolverine's board. For Great Lakes Energy, you can see that David Covey, Mark Carson, and Paul Bile, they're all up for re-election this year. And representing Great Lakes Energy on Wolverine are Rick Evans and Mark Carson. And then you have Presque Isle. You can see Sandy, Daryl, and Sally all up for re-election this year, with Alan and John sitting on the boards. And so this is more of how this structure works. And then one thing to note, if you're really paying attention, you'll see Terry Lautner on Wolverine's board and Cherryland's Electric's board. Terry also sits on the Spartan Renewable Energy Board of Directors as well. And so he's on Wolverine's board representing that agency and not Cherryland Electric. And then, John, I see your question. Are the members made available to those that are ready to be on the board? So if I understand your question correctly, in order to run for board of directors for any of these cooperatives, you have to be a member, meaning you have to pay a bill to get on there. And yeah, I think Terry and Melinda are cousins. Not positive though. But okay, yeah, next slide. And so why are we talking about these cooperatives today? Why are they important? And it's because of the impact they can make and the impact we all can have on them. Because the cooperative may be the single best place in your community to make big change happen quickly, as well as impact generations to come. When you build a coal plant, a natural gas plant, a wind farm, a solar farm, those projects aren't going to be there just for 2-3 years. Those are going to be there for decades. So the decisions we make now are going to be impacting our communities and our children for decades to come. And that comes with a lot of power and responsibility. And so when we talk about what this needs to look like, it's going to provide local jobs. It's going to be providing economic development. It's going to be saving low income communities on their electric bill. It's going to be creating more reliable energy. And ultimately, it's going to help create cleaner air, cleaner water by having these cleaner energy sources, which is better for our kids in the climate crisis. And then to throw in a once in generation funding from the Inflation Reduction Act, these next 5 to 10 years are going to be crucial to be utilizing funds that aren't normally there to transition our grid to a cleaner, more local and resilient grid. And we can really make an impact. Like you mentioned, they are Democratic. Every year, 2 to 3 seats are open for election. And as you can see, there are very low turnout elections. 72% have less than a 10% turnout on average. And because of this low turnout, this means these elections can be decided by hundreds, if not tens of votes. And so for my last part, I'm going to go over a few examples of our cooperatives so you can see the vote spreads and how little people actually turn out to vote. So on this next slide, I just created this in Excel spreadsheets. I just went through and found the past vote totals. And then just from this slide, I just want you to see the highest vote total is on the top left there for David Schweitzer for 2,994 votes. That is just the highest. But let's zoom into Cherryland real quick. You look on this next slide. This is the past 3 election cycles. So everyone that's on the current board, this is how they've won. But we're going to zoom in particular about the 2022 at large and then the people up for election this year. So on the next slide, you'll see that for 2022 at large, the top 2 people gotta be on the board. And you'll see here that Dean Adams came in second, so he was on the board, but he beat the 3rd place person, Vicki Olson, by only 9 votes. So Vicki Olson was 9 votes away from having a seat on the board. Very small margin. And then 2021, Terry Lautner ran for at large, so everyone got a vote. And based on those members, all the people that turned out for that election, it was only about 9.5% of all members. And so there's room to grow and there's room to have more people involved to have their voices heard on what they want their cooperative. Now let's look at Great Lakes Energy. Again, these are all the points of election for the past few years that have everyone currently on the board. And again, though, we're going to zoom in on this next slide to 2021 because everyone in 2021 is up for a re-election this year. And I want you to see, like, even going up against incumbents, it is possible. Paul Szymanski, he was on the board for a number of cycles prior to this. David Covey, though, he came And by getting less than 1,000 votes, he was still able to upset an incumbent. Mark Carson, he was running against Nathan Altman, won by like 250 votes. Not negligible, but again, a smaller margin. And Paul Bile, he had no one running against him, so he racked up 277 votes. And I just think about like national elections and statewide elections that come down to millions or hundreds of thousands, if not tens of thousands of votes. And then I see these differences, and it's like if we can have an impact on our local decision making, our grid resiliency, this feels like a good way. And so, lastly, we're going to look at Presque Isle Electric and Gas. Again, you only have a couple of vote totals, just barely over 1,000 for the past 3 years or a few cycles. But we're going to zoom in one more time for the 2021 on the next slide here. And you'll see that I'm not able to find data on like how many people are actually in the Sheboygan district and etc. But I do have data for at large. So looking at the at large, only about 6.1% of all people, 31,000 members, only about 6.1% voted in the 2021 election for at large. So this is all to show that these margins can be very small. And by people getting more involved, having your voices heard, showing up to meetings, interacting with your board members, supporting them if you wish, we can have a huge impact on where they go next. So we are now going to transition to the panel. So on the next slide, lastly, we do have an historic opportunity. I apologize. Mentioned this already though, but with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, we have direct pay tax credits, billions of dollars in clean energy incentives, some forgivable loans. And then recently, the Michigan Solar for All, through the EPA, awarded Michigan $156 million for solar programs. These aren't utility scale, but they are for community solar and low income and disadvantaged communities. And so there is room for that money to still be incorporated in this transition. Great. So now is the exciting part. You don't have to listen to me talk anymore. We're going to hear from three wonderful industry folks that represent different angles of this conversation. We have Courtney Doyle, who will kick us off. She's the Communications and Members Relations Manager at Cherryland Electric. And as you see, Cherryland has led the way in creating innovative options to meet the needs of the communities they serve, including pioneering the state's first community solar and low-income community solar programs. And Cherryland proudly provides best in-state electric reliability and is on track to provide upwards of 90% carbon-free electricity by the year 2030. Christian, he is a lifelong Michigander with a focus on renewable energy. He holds a degree in mechanical engineering from U of M and has had a number of careers, including in automotive, medical device, and now renewables. So in 2020, he started working with wind and solar, and now he's at Harvest Solar, and he's responsible for helping business owners find the correct commercial solar solution based on many factors. And then lastly, we have Joel. He's with this national group Reset that helps rural electric cooperatives all over the country adopt more clean energy. And he's based in Colorado. He's a campaign consultant who has helped over 150 candidates across the country run in these races across the nation. And he holds a master's of community development and has contributed to the elections of community organizing in 6 countries. So each panelist is going to have about 5 to 7 minutes. We will hold off to questions at the very end. We'll have about 15 minutes then for questions and for the entire panel. So you can drop questions in the chat. We'll keep track of those, but we won't answer those until every panelist has gone. So we're going to start off with Courtney Doyle. And so Courtney, whenever you are ready, you can take it over.
Great. Thanks, Nicholas. Again, my name is Courtney Doyle. I'm the Communications and Member Relations Manager at Cherryland Electric Cooperative. And I'm excited to talk you through a little more about Cherryland, add a little color to what Nicholas shared with us, the programs that we're really, really proud of, and some exciting things on the horizon. So let's start a little bit diving deeper into our power supply. If you can go to the next slide, please. We have, as Nicholas mentioned, about 62% carbon free with about 19% coming from renewables. We do have 2 utility scale solar arrays under development with Wolverine, along with the historic agreement with Palisades, the nuclear power plant. And so that puts the Michigan co-ops, the Michigan Wolverine co-ops, including Cherryland, on track to be providing upwards of 90% carbon-free energy by 2030, which would be the first utilities in the state to do that and faster than any other utility in the state to do that. And then just a quick point to kind of what Nicholas was saying, all the Wolverine members share that same power supply portfolio. Obviously, we have different sizes of membership, but just so that that you guys are aware, we all share the same power supply portfolio because we partner with Wolverine, which has been really great. Next slide, please. When it comes to clean energy, the Michigan co-ops really are leading the way. Wolverine and the Michigan co-ops actually partnered with, I believe it's John Deere Renewables, to develop the state's first commercial wind farm. That was back in 2006. Fast forward a little bit, in tandem with our local municipality here in Traverse City, our municipal utility, Cherryland developed the state's first community solar project. That was about a decade ago in 2013. A few years after that, in 2018, Cherryland partnered with the state of Michigan and Northwest Michigan Community Action Agency to develop the first low-income community solar program, which is designed to provide that community solar option while pairing it with weatherization to kind of two birds, one stone, some of these issues. And then, as I mentioned before, co-ops continue to lead the way with, so those two solar projects we talked about will total about 300 megawatts of solar development in the state of Michigan, about 150 megawatts each. And moving on from there, Nicholas talked a little bit about this once, this historic funding opportunity that we have with the Inflation Reduction Act. And he's absolutely right. Wolverine and the distribution co-ops strategically pursue state and federal funding opportunities year round. And so we were really excited when we heard about some of these things in the IRA. Co-ops and their members have successfully leveraged grant funding from the USDA, MDARD, and Eagle, just to name a few. So that I believe, I want to say Leelanau Fruit, who has one of our member distribution solar arrays on our system. And I believe they worked with Harvest Solar to build that. So shout out to Christian and Harvest, who are great partners for that. We're able to take advantage of some of that money. And then Wolverine and member co-ops with the IRA funding opportunities jumped at the chance to leverage that money and did essentially as soon as we heard about it back in 2022. So actively engaged and actively pursuing those opportunities and excited to share any successes that we see come from that. Now I kind of want to just zoom in on the Cherryland specific member programs. Right now we have about 4 megawatts of member-owned renewables across our system. That is majority solar with a little bit of wind here and there. And they do that by some of the programs that we've created. If you want to go to the next slide, our goal has always been to find ways to create programs that meet the needs for our members. And so these are just a few of them. So the renewable programs we offer, community solar, which aims to make it easy for members who maybe can't afford to put a panel on their own home or an array in their own backyard, make solar available to them by subscribing to shares. We have buy all, sell all, where a member can essentially install their renewable, whether it's wind or solar, and then they sell all the electricity that produces back to the co-op, but then that offsets their power bill. Net metering essentially is where you install panels and then you aim to use the electricity that you provide in your home. And then our newest offering is a large renewable, which is very similar to net metering, but on a larger scale, where the arrays are scaled specifically to meet the energy needs of these specific, a lot of times, commercial accounts. We also have a large population in the rural communities who are lower income or a little more vulnerable, so it's been a top priority to us to provide support for those members. So a couple examples of that is Cherryland funded the kickstart of Habitat Grand Traverse Priority Home Repair Grant Program. Really proud of that. Again, we pioneered the low-income community solar program here in the state and recently launched a low-income home repair grant program that aims to bridge the gaps left behind by other home repair programs that aim at energy efficiency. Sometimes there are just qualifications that members need to make one fix before they qualify for the further fixes. So this grant is designed to work with the agencies that do the weatherization and stuff and the actual home repair to get that fixed so that they can move on to the next step. And then, of course, we have our energy use programs, We did recently in the last year started an optional residential time of use rate to give members a little more control over when they use energy on the peak times and off the peak times, and then kind of benefit from that when they're able to shift their usage out of the peak times. We offer free energy audits, and then we have a rebate program, as many utilities do. And we have shifted that to really focus on greenhouse gas reduction with the electrification using our clean portfolio. So since we started measuring the greenhouse gas implications with those measures, since 2022, members have installed measures that will reduce 11,000 tons in greenhouse gases. So that's exciting. Just a quick shout out to our community partners who help us make all of those programs happen. Of course, NMCAA, Harvest Solar, CBS Solar have been great partners for our members who are interested in having their own little bit of solar. Habitat, Freedom Builders, Leelanau Energy, State of Michigan. So just acknowledging that, you know, as Nicholas said, we're all in this together, right? We want to do this and do the best for our communities because it's the right thing to do. So I know we talked about a lot today. If you want to move to the next slide. So I do just want to reiterate that if you have questions, if you have concerns about the programs available at your co-op, if you're a Cherryland member and want to know more about any of these, give us a call. Our door is always open. We want to engage with you, attend the annual meeting, vote in the elections. At Cherryland, we have a podcast that we do after every board meeting that kind of runs through what happened at that board meeting because we want to make it easy and accessible to everybody. Our CEO also, she writes a column every month. It goes in the magazine, it goes on our blog, there's a podcast format, and then she will actually engage in the comment sections on the blog. So we're really proud of the accessibility and the transparency we have with our membership. So when in doubt, just give us a call, swing by the office. We really love to engage with our members. And just to recap, Michigan co-ops like Cherryland are leading the way. If you want to go to this next slide here in Michigan, we have the cleanest energy portfolios in the state. We are, again, on track to be upwards of 90% carbon free by 2030, which is faster than any other utility in the state of Michigan and supersedes the state's clean energy standard. At Cherryland, we're really proud to not only be doing that, but providing best in state reliability and resiliency. A lot of that goes through investing in the resiliency of our regional grid. We provide affordable rates at the same time. Again, it's important to us to balance affordability, reliability, environmental stewardship for our members. So we're providing rates that are 10 to 20% lower than our neighboring IOU. And again, co-ops were built upon the community, right? So we are proud to be really positive community partners and hope to continue to do so. And I think Nicholas said we're going to save questions to the end, so you can skip my last slide.
Yeah, thank you so much, Courtney. Really appreciate that. Up next is Joel. So Joel, whenever you're ready, take it over.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Nick, can you see me on screen?
Absolutely. You're good too.
Awesome. Great to be here. Coming to you from sunny Western Colorado, where I've been working as a community organizing and elections guy for the past 20 years. And in the last couple of years, I've gotten to help a whole bunch of co-ops make sense of all the complexities of co-op life today. So we're going to talk about a couple case studies from out here where smaller co-ops, one serving 30, 40, 50,000 members, have been making really bold transitions all by themselves. So kick me to the next slide here. I'm going to start with Holy Cross Energy. This is blue Colorado. So we're talking jet set communities like Aspen, Vail, Glenwood Springs. These folks are now on track with about 10 years of work to become the first small co-op in the nation that's 100% renewable powered. They just hit 73%. And in the course of doing this, I'm sorry, the other thing I should flag is this is very cold, very snowy territory. These folks see about 7 months of snow on the ground every year. They're at a pretty high elevation, above 8,000 feet. And despite all that, they're pulling this off with largely local resource. So in the course of their switch to 100% renewables, these folks are saving their members 75 million bucks, working out to about $2,000 per member this decade. And we'll talk a little later about how they're doing that. But vitally, the coolest thing that switch to renewables has done for them is it's let them keep rates flat for the last 5 years, which is, I'm sorry, 4 years, which is something that very few co-ops can say in this time of energy price inflation. So they've really enjoyed the ability to sign new power purchase agreements that lock in prices. They are reinvesting these savings in a bunch of cool bells and whistles that are often tough for co-ops to finance. In their case, they're using their new capital to levelize bills, which is to say, if you are a working person and those summer heating bills and winter heating bills really hurt you, summer cooling, they offer you a flat rate year round that makes your price much more predictable. They are doing aggressive electrification EV incentives out of their own pocket. So supplementing state and federal funds that are available, oftentimes to double or triple the size of those incentives with their own capital. What's really cool is that they've partnered with a third party nonprofit community organization that is knocking doors and shaking members by the collar to publicize and get people enrolled in these incentives. It's not purely passive education on a bill or by email. They're going door to door and helping people through the application process. Um, a side note on that too is that they've created a curated list of local contractors that can help retrofit homes, do electrification, and so they've really made a neat local jobs market for those services. And we've seen employment grow to a couple small hundred people that are now offering that. So a really cool economic development option. And then lastly, they're investing in wildfire. We've had several years of scary summer fire out here, and in cybersecurity defense. So this is Holy Cross. We have board members at this co-op that are happy to share the story, tell the story of how they figured all this stuff out. Moving to the next, we have a very red community. This is Lauren Boebert country in Western Colorado, the Delta Montrose Electric. And this is a typical kind of rural co-op where you've got one small city of about 20,000 people and then 7 towns of 1 to 3,000 people each. So a more distributed kind of large service territory. These folks live in a very hot, dusty, dry climate, and they're experiencing right now about 80 days above 100 degrees. So a radically different set of challenges from the past folks. In this case, these folks were supplied by a long-term 40-year contract with a generation and transmission association, and that supplier was just not able to catch up quick enough to lower costs. The supplier was stuck on a bunch of old coal and natural gas that was on the costlier side of natural gas and was not willing to make the switch quick enough to lower rates. So these folks decided to stage a very bold and daring hostile contract exit, one that ultimately went to the Colorado Supreme Court and then went to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in Washington, D.C. After leaving their supplier, they are saving their folks $100 million by switching to new, cleaner, cheaper energy supply. And they have held their rate steady for 5 years. Members have not seen a single rate increase in 5 years, thanks to this switch. In their case, they're on this very solar rich area. They're onboarding a sizable 100 megawatts of new solar. They just announced an 80 megawatt agrovoltaics project where a new solar facility is going to preserve shaded spaces for sheep and livestock. So there was a win-win for local ranchers and for the solar developer. In the course of this, they have won a bunch of federal funding to help make all this cheaper and make the economics more attractive. And their biggest point here, and I think the political coalition that emerged to support all this, was the ability to lock in prices for things like solar and wind and know exactly what they were going to be paying inflation free for the next 20, 30, 40 years, the lifespan of those projects. So two really interesting case studies from small electric cooperatives in radically different cultural territory out here. Kick me to the next slide, Nicholas. And why is this possible? The answer is that advanced technology is just cheaper, cleaner, more local, usually all at once. And so here we're looking at a graph of the latest Lazard unsubsidized cost of various energy sources. And we see that much of the time, wind and solar are just coming in radically cheaper than our conventional legacy sources. The only other piece of commentary with both these orgs is as they kind of near the final mile, say the final 10% of their switch to 100% renewables, they're currently planning on doing this with a bunch of large batteries, but both are exploring other options. They're looking at stuff like geo storage for, say, hot water or hot salt, and looking at some other options. But that's going to be, I think, the space for innovation, where we really see people testing new ideas so that the batteries aren't the only tool in the toolkit, and we're not totally beholden to whatever the battery cost curve looks like in the next decade. And then lastly, not to pick on anybody in particular, but this is a real current rural electric co-op board. So let's all take a look at these gentlemen here. And then to the next slide, this is also a real current rural electric cooperative board. And the pattern that I get to see helping dozens of co-ops around the country is there are kind of two types of boards in this world right now. And boards that look like the first slide are not in a great position to make sense of all the complexities of life now. And boards that are on this, boards that look like what we see on the slide here are doing a really good job of getting ahead of the curve and bringing results home to their members. And so everything we can do to diversify boards and help put younger working professionals familiar with current technology on these boards is going to yield dividends for members, and staff as well. So that's that. We have, Nick, was there another slide?
If so, I missed it in
Okay.
there. I apologize. We are going to stop sharing these slides and kick it. Thank you, Joel, so much. Really appreciate
You bet.
that. And for timing, we are going to kick it to Christian. And Christian, are you able to share your slides now? Fantastic. Well, that's a busy calendar. Love Lake at the Clouds, though. And then, folks, we will run just a couple minutes over if you wish for Q&A, but no worries if you need to jet right at the end here. But Christian, whenever you're ready.
All right. Thanks. Sorry for that changeover. So, yeah, appreciate it, Courtney and Joel and Nicholas for putting this on. I'm going to kind of echo a lot of the stuff that Courtney and Joel were talking about. It's really great seeing rural co-ops. They really are on the leading edge of this. They are, providing lower cost for their customers. They're providing lower escalation rates year over year because they are getting into, they have a higher renewable portfolio, which doesn't really have variable fuel cost. So it definitely helps the customers out quite a bit. At the same time, as someone coming from my side at Harvest Solar, we are a solar installer for kind of commercial and agricultural use. It's great to see Michigan have these rural co-ops. It's harder for some of our businesses to take advantage of on-site solar for themselves with how these co-ops operate. So not to be the kind of and on a sour note, but kind of talk about some of the realism that we see with boots on the ground. So with Harvest, we're a solar installer based in Michigan, been around for 15 plus years, and do a lot of behind the meter projects, meaning it is solar for on-site use for businesses. And we do some residential and some larger scale stuff, but that's really the focus of it. So this kind of outlines a little bit more of what Courtney was talking about of some of the programs, and this is what Cherryland offers. This is really the same portfolios as Wolverine. So there's really three main categories that a resident or business can take advantage of on a co-op in Michigan. You have the net metering. This is up to 20 kilowatts, and to help frame it out a little bit, most panels are around a 500 watt panel now. So 20 kilowatt means 40 panels on your roof. This would be a little bit of a larger residential size, but this is kind of what fits for residential. This is great for residential customers. The co-ops can be really great for doing on-site solar, helping the customers feel like they can have it in their own hands and take advantage of opportunities. Where we kind of run into more difficult scenarios of trying to make something work for a business is when we get into commercial projects and where we run into that buy all, sell all, or large renewable category. So the buy all, sell all is similar. A business puts solar on their facility up to 100 kilowatts. So this can be a pretty large system. But the way it works from a financial standpoint is that it's not offsetting. The electrons are offsetting what they're using at their facility, but the way the bill works is that everything is being credited at 6.5 cents. You know, it's a great scenario for a lot of customers, but being capped at 100 kilowatts, you know, that's a business that might have a electricity bill of $1,000 a month. A lot of businesses fall into that range, but there's a lot of businesses and manufacturers in the area, or larger agriculture that are spending, you know, 10, 20, 30 grand a month on electricity. And so that bumps you up into the larger renewable category. And with that, you know, we can go up to a megawatt, which is a very large array. But then it's kind of a calculation of how we see the bill credit come back to you. And so this just kind of shows the different categories of what we can work within. Overall, I don't want to take away anything from the co-ops, because when we look at them being way out in front of the other utilities in the state, they are providing renewable energy. They have great rates for their customers. They really are doing a lot, but when it comes to flexibility for the individuals to kind of take it into their own hands, I think these are some opportunities that we can potentially look at. I think one thing to take note of is that, you know, we talk about the net metering and being able to get a credit back for what you overproduce. I think it's hard for a lot of people to visualize what a day looks like of what you're using and what solar actually produces. And so I wanted to give kind of an example of what that would look like. This is what a facility, a general, you know, manufacturing facility, a commercial facility would look like. The red line is showing the facility consumption over several days. So you can see that, you know, during the daytime usage, the line is higher up. The nighttime, it drops down, has kind of a base load, and then goes up again each day. If we are basically saying that we are going to match 100% of their usage with solar, then we're going to be way overproducing during the middle of the day. So realistically, you know, if we don't have a good bill credit that's going to give us a lot of value back, it's going to be harder to financially make this work. So one thing that we see a lot of the time is that we will make a system so that it only offsets about a third or a quarter of their overall usage, so that it's actually being used on site. And this is kind of similar to what Joel was talking about, that, you know, we can offset, you know, if you have different renewables, different energy generation in there, you can offset a good amount of the electricity. But getting over that last final hurdle of that last 10% or 20% of electricity to be renewable is definitely a challenge that we're going to be facing coming in the future. So this is kind of mostly what I wanted to touch on from boots on the ground as a installer, is that, you know, sometimes it's harder for us to see financially how we can help a business, because you know, the co-ops are great at a, you know, residential or something that's staying behind the meter, but when you get bigger or give, you know, the customer more options, it definitely can be harder to find the right solution. But then again, as a Michigander and looking at what the other utilities are doing, you know, I love the work that the co-ops are doing. I love seeing how much renewable mix they have within their portfolio and the rates that they're giving to their customers. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword for me. But yeah, just wanted to give a little bit of an education overall of what it looks like from an installer's perspective, working with a rural energy co-op. I went a little fast there. I could go over some more things, but I know we're backing up on the clock, so I'll kick it over back to Nicholas and see if there's any questions.
Great. Thanks, Christian. And yeah, sorry y'all for this time crunch. Never seem to have enough time to talk about everything we need. So before we do some Q&A, I just want to drop in the chat this bit.ly link, bit.ly/REC interest. If you put that in, that's a it's a feedback form for us, so we can learn how we can do better and help inform y'all better in the future. And then 2, if you do want to get involved, you can check out some ways you want to get involved, and then we can follow up and help connect you with your co-op or talk about the best way to make that happen. So We are coming towards the end. Our panelists, if you have to leave right at the hour, please do so. If you're able to stay a few minutes, that's great. But yeah, if you have any questions, please drop a star in the chat, like so, and then we can have you come off mute. And if your panelist is still here, they can answer it. If not, I'll do my best. So does anyone have any questions?
I did notice there was a question in the chat just about low voter turnout that was already kind of answered by Courtney, but I wondered if other panelists might want to speak to that question.
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, Courtney, Joel, or Christian. I know Courtney and Joel, you answered. Do you want to expand on what you said at all, or?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that co-op.
So often what we'll see is that the average person just has no idea this exists. They pay the bill like they pay any other utility bill, like a water bill, and just have not gotten the memo that this is in a world where so much is outside of our control. They have a voice. They have a say over crafting a vision for one of the most fundamental aspects of their lives. And so there's a lot that we can do to get people excited about that. But generally, we like to go dialogue with community stakeholders, with the main street business community, with service organizations, with governmental organizations, with schools about what are our energy values here. How does who we are and what we want to see happen in our community inform the way we want this co-op to work, and then what's our theory of change. How do we get from here to there? And you get people thinking about that, and it's something no one's ever asked them, and the conversations become pretty interesting, and we see people get excited about it.
Absolutely. We ask our members quite a bit about that. And it's one of the things that I want to just kind of reiterate, that all co-ops serve a really unique, all of our footprints are really unique. So once you've met one co-op, you've only met one co-op, right? And so that's something I know that really helped with our voter turnout, was making online options available. We do our elections through a third party just so that it's as ethical as humanly possible. But yeah, so we have an online option, we have a mail-in option, and then members can also vote directly at the annual meeting. So we try to provide as many options as possible. And then also we send out reminders to our members about 3 times throughout, so that we're not spamming them, but just reminding them, oh yeah, if you haven't gotten around to it yet, here's the link to the online voting, or reminding them of their options.
Thank you for that. Uh, I apologize. The form should now be good to go. Thank you for flagging that, y'all. So please try that again. But then I see Casey. Looks like you have a question.
Yeah, thank you so much for this really important topic. I also was curious about ways that like members are engaged in, or like if there's examples of members being engaged to help get renewables on board quicker, like because rural electric co-ops are more democratic in nature than like an investor-owned utility. Is that like a mechanism that's used or has been used? And I think of like most recently in New York, Build Public Renewables just passed. And so that allows like NYPA, and it's not a rural electric co-op, but I'm just thinking of this as an example, like that allows like New York to like build renewables quicker than like um, the IOUs. So beyond just like the board acting, are like actual like ratepayer members democratically engaged?
Casey, if I can jump on that one for you. I know here in Michigan, there was recently some legislation passed that bypasses the zoning authority of local communities. And I think that's designed to expedite that. But it also comes with a lot of mixed feelings, right? Because we're part of these communities. We don't want to go above them, right? Like we want to work together with them. So there is some legislation like that. I would say engagement with lawmakers is probably the best place. A lot of what we do is highly regulated and goes through those avenues in Michigan.
And does the who regulates the rural electric co-ops? Is it still regulated by like I'm from the East Coast, so we would call it like the Public Utilities Commission. I still can't remember what we call it in Michigan.
Yeah, so in Michigan, it's the Michigan Public Service Commission. Cooperatives can choose to be self-regulated or self-governed. And so I believe all the Michigan co-ops moved in that direction. So there are some things, it's very complicated. There are some pieces in which we fall in that bucket that kind of falls in with the MPSC. And then there are also some things that fall under our own regulation and our own board regulation. And then we have reporting requirements to the MPSC and things like that.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah, thanks for that answer. Very, very great question. I see John Freeman, you're on stack next.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This is not so much a question, but a comment. I'm a little concerned about throwing out the carbon-free standard because I think there is a tendency to confuse that with a clean energy standard. And so carbon-free, even though it includes nuclear power, and it can include, natural gas, as long as there's carbon sequestration to 95%. And so I just think we should be very careful because the recent legislation that was enacted last November increases the renewable energy portfolio standard to 50% by 2030 and 60% by 2040. So by your own statistics, the co-ops are going to be behind, particularly if in fact you're going to get behind Wolverine's power regarding buying power from Palisades, which has two huge problems. One is that the nuclear power industry has never been able to come in on a fixed budget. There's always tremendous cost overruns. And then, of course, you've got huge environmental problems with Palisades being located on Lake Michigan, and there's no solution for the long-term radioactive waste. And so there's a concern that if the cost of Palisades, which is frankly being subsidized by taxpayer dollars, continues to go up, then the low costing rates you're able to offer your members, and I guess I'm speaking to Courtney right now, may in fact go up somewhat dramatically. And so I really think you ought to think twice about supporting Wolverine's effort to get behind Palisades, because again, the economics of nuclear power, particularly what Joel pointed out, that the levelized cost of energy for nuclear power is much greater than solar and wind. And so just a word of caution there. But again, I appreciate all you're doing, and I certainly want to recognize Cherryland for having a very good, one of the first community solar projects in the state, which is very good. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments, John, and I'm happy to talk with you more about it. The numbers we delivered are based on the state's mandate and the calculations that come with that. And the state is very supportive of the Palisades program, so we are going to be able to count that towards the renewable standard. It's complicated, I know, and there's a lot of pieces that I know not everybody's a fan of nuclear, but it is that base load generation that, we talked about the challenges with battery storage and that we're still learning so much in that space. And we're working towards, I know Wolverine is pursuing some funding again through the programs available in the IRA. So it's again, I know it's a complicated thing and I really appreciate your feedback on it.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And yeah, this is just to show like there is no perfect solution. We do need to have community engagement to bring in these concerns and having this two-way conversation. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, John, and I appreciate those comments, Courtney. So we'll have time for one more question. And so Mark asks, could the panelists talk a bit more about distributed resources? In particular, as DRs are on the distributor side, are there incentives for distribution co-ops, so like Cherryland, Great Lakes Energy and stuff, to grow distributed resources, panels on rooftops, batteries, etc.? Does Wolverine offer profit sharing to their member co-ops?
If I could, I'm probably in the best position to do this, flag a really interesting policy tension that we have now and will have in years coming, which is large scale, utility scale solar is oftentimes half, maybe a third the cost of rooftop. So from an economic and from a, co-op bottom line standpoint, utility is now at a place where it's much more attractive. There are times and places where rooftop is not a net win unless co-ops see and encounter opportunity to link that rooftop with things like electric vehicles or like home-based batteries that then become a dispatchable resource later. A more distributed system that can do things like realign the curve that our solar friends shared and bank a lot of that power when it's available for times later when solar is not. It's a tremendously complex question. Nobody has answers, and co-ops are all trying to figure out the math and the economics of this. But it's something that everybody's wrestling with, and obviously the various stakeholders have different views. But it's we're looking for leaders that can bring teams of people together to make sense of all of that.
And just to address Mark, nice to hear from you, Mark. Happy to talk more about this. We do not get profit sharing for that piece. And I know we've talked a lot more, and I know you've spoken with Tammy. But as far as, and I know that's not an option, but it is kind of what Joel was talking about, some of these distributed energy resources, things we're exploring and what those options are and finding the best fit for programs for our members. Because like I said, when you know one co-op, you know one co-op. And at Cherryland, the vast majority of our members are residential. So those are all things we're keeping in mind, but we want to do it thoughtfully, and we don't want to experiment on our members by any means. And so that's something that, again, I'm happy to talk with you more about that. That's a complex piece.
Yeah, great question. All right, thank you so much, folks. We're gonna wrap it up here to respect our panelists' time and all y'all's time. I just want to, yeah, you can give snaps, drop some love in the chat, but thank you so much for these panelists that took some time out of their day. I know even though I've been knee deep in this work for a while, I still learned a lot from them, sharing those answers. And this is what it's all about for us at Groundwork, is really increasing these conversations and awareness, because we know these cooperatives are leading the nation in our transition. And if we just have more participation from the members, more dialogue between all the different stakeholders, we can have a transition that works for everyone, that doesn't leave people in the dark. So thank you so much. Again, if you are interested in staying involved or want to offer us some feedback, because we can always do better and help provide more information, you can fill that out there. The recording will go out to everyone that signed up, and I'll also provide some contact information if you have any more follow-up questions. But yeah, I hope you all have a safe and wonderful Memorial weekend. Again, thank you so much to all our panelists. Really appreciate y'all. And stay safe, and let's get that clean energy.
Bye, everyone.